everyone. Welcome back to Real Life. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're taking an amazing 4,000-mile road trip across the United States in the summer of 1941. So sit back and enjoy this 44-minute travelogue film. This journey begins in New York State with a family of mom, dad, and two young girls traveling in a brand new 1941 Buick Roadmaster. Who the family was is sadly lost to history. I found this reel about 10 years ago. The Greater Buffalo, constructed in the mid-1920s, is the first part. The family takes a ride aboard, though I don't believe it carried cars, so I'm not sure who drove the car from Buffalo to Detroit. However, this was in the last months of the Greater Buffalo's civilian use before she was converted into a Great Lakes aircraft carrier for the U.S. military after Pearl Harbor. The USS Sable was a United States Navy training ship during the Second World War. She would be purchased by the Navy in 1942 and converted to a training aircraft carrier to be used on the Great Lakes. She lacked a hangar deck, elevators, or armament and was not a true warship, but she provided advanced training for naval aviators in carrier takeoffs and landings. A brief shot of Flint, Michigan. The dirty poor film quality can be forgiven given it is 1936 film stock. The Milwaukee Clipper was launched on December 22, 1904 in Cleveland, Ohio at the shipyards of the American Shipbuilding Company. Christian Uniata, when she was launched, she was built for the Anchor Line, the Great Lakes Marine Division of the Pennsylvania Railroad. Her sister ships were the SS Tionesta of 1902 and the SS Octorara of 1910. The ship is 361 feet in length, 45 feet in beam, a depth of 22 feet with a gross tonnage of 4,333 tons. She carried 350 passengers in staterooms at 18 knots. As originally built, she had a riveted steel hull and a wooden superstructure. For the Pennsylvania Railroad, she carried passengers and freight between Buffalo, New York, and Duluth, Minnesota until 1915. That year, the Anti-Monopoly Panama Canal Act, which forbade railroads from owning steamships, went into effect. The Uniata was laid up in 1936 due to poor economic conditions, as well as new regulations on wooden passenger ships following the Morro Castle disaster. The Uniata was moored in Buffalo until being sold in 1940 to Wisconsin and Michigan Steamship Company. She was rebuilt and used as a passenger ship on Lake Michigan. She was extensively modernized. Her boilers were converted to burn fuel oil instead of coal, and the old cabins and wooden superstructure were removed and replaced with steel to meet the new maritime fire safety standards created after the SS Morro Castle fire off Asbury Park, New Jersey in 1934. The streamlined forward stack is false and does not ventilate engine exhaust. It's a signature of naval architect George Sharp, whose ideas regarding fireproof ships were first incorporated into Uniata. The modernized ship now featured air-conditioned staterooms, a children's playroom, a movie theater, a dance floor with a live band, soda fountain, bar, cafeteria, lounges, and a sports deck, and capacity to carry 120 automobiles. She was christened Milwaukee Clipper on June 2, 1941. Effectively retired since 1970, she's now a museum ship in Muskegon, Michigan, undergoing restoration. From Milwaukee, we continue west past Hoodoo's before arriving in St. Paul. We don't see much of the city. The family focused on a visit to a nearby lake and grand home and a lakefront cottage. Perhaps relatives, as we switch to Kodachrome footage. A brief glimpse of the Moorhead Arch and Fargo, and then we're traveling through the prairies and badlands of North Dakota with a stop in Theodore Roosevelt National Park. The park is an American national park of the Badlands in western North Dakota, comprising of 3 geographically separated areas. Honoring U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt, it is the only American national park named directly after a single person. The park covers 70,446 acres of land in 3 sections: the North Unit, the South Unit, and the Elkhorn Ranch Unit. The Little Missouri River flows through all 3 units of the park. The Maw Daw Hay Trail connects all 3 units. Roosevelt first came to the North Dakota Badlands to hunt bison in September 1883. During that first short trip, he got his bison and fell in love with the rugged lifestyle and the perfect freedom of the West. In 1941, it was only a wildlife refuge and would not attain park status until 1947. In Browning, Montana, we briefly see the TP Coffee House. It was originally a gas station built in 1934 as Kramer's Wigwam gas station. Initially a Conoco station, by 1950 it had changed brands, becoming a Standard Oil station. Later named Wigwam Cafe, it operated until the 1960s. Glacier National Park was clearly one of the highlights of this journey, given the extensive amount of footage captured. The park has an extraordinary long history, beginning with Native Americans' arrival some 10,000 years ago. The earliest occupants with lineage to current tribes were the Flathead or Salish, the Kootenai, Shoshone, and Cheyenne. The Blackfeet lived on the eastern slopes of what later became the park, as well as the Great Plains immediately to the east. The park region provided the Blackfeet shelter from the harsh winter winds of the plains, allowing them to supplement their traditional bison hunts with other game meat. The Blackfeet Indian Reserve borders the park on east, while the Flathead Indian Reservation is located west and south of the park. In the 1930s and 40s, long before all the modern technologies we take for granted, National Geographic magazine was perhaps the best ongoing source of knowledge with monthly publications. The July 1933 issue specifically covers many of the sites on this particular trip. Perhaps the family wanted to introduce their daughters to the wonders firsthand, maybe inspired by the magazine. Clearly, they gave them many opportunities with exploring on foot and horseback. To hike on a glacier and view crevasses and meltwater streams in the middle of summer is something few folks can do or take the time to, even today. The park, established in 1910, is considered the crown jewel of the U.S. park system, with glaciers, alpine meadows, carved valleys, and spectacular lakes. Early home movie footage of Glacier National Park is unusual, especially color footage. We don't see the mum very often. That's because she's behind the camera, capturing all this amazing footage. The camera is an unidentified turreted 3-lens model, as will become apparent with the occasional bit of one of the lenses visible along the right-hand frame. It's rather interesting that the film is a mix of black and white and Kodachrome color film, varying from 1936 to 1941 according to the Edge Code. Perhaps they'd been saving the reels for just such an occasion. The kids enjoyed drinking water straight from the streams. To see bergies slowly melting in high elevation lakes is something few ever see. Departing, a black bear shows up in the road. I know the footage is out of focus, but it's still worth seeing. The next stop is majestic Yellowstone Park, the first national park in the United States. Within Yellowstone's 2.2 million acres, visitors have unparalleled opportunities to observe wildlife in an intact ecosystem and explore geothermal areas that contain about half the world's active geysers. The unique hydrothermal and geological features are what sets it apart from any other park. The human history of the park began at least 11,000 years ago when Native Americans began to hunt and fish in the region. During the construction of the post office in Gardner, Montana in the 1950s, an obsidian point of Clovis origin was found that dated from approximately 11,000 years ago. These Paleo-Indians of the Clovis culture used the significant amounts of obsidian found in the park to make cutting tools and weapons. Arrowheads made of Yellowstone obsidian have been found as far away as the Mississippi Valley, indicating that a regular obsidian trade existed between local tribes and tribes further east. The family captured wonderful footage of the many geysers and mineral deposits. Sadly, this would be the last year of significant tourist activity for some time, as with the U.S. joining in the war in just 6 months' time, the park would fall into neglect and disrepair until the 1950s with the post-war boom and the family car making travel easier. Interest in the park would increase dramatically. This was a time when we didn't quite understand or appreciate the issues with wildlife. Bear encounters were frequent and sometimes tragic for wildlife and human alike. Perhaps the most famous of the park's geothermal sites is Old Faithful. Old Faithful is a cone geyser and was named in 1870 during the Washburn-Langford Dome expedition, and was the first geyser in the park to be named. It is a highly predictable geothermal feature and has erupted every 44 minutes to 2 hours since 2000. Eruptions can shoot 3,700 to 8,400 gallons, or about 14,000 to 32,000 liters of boiling water, to a height of 106 to 185 feet, or 32 to 56 meters, lasting anywhere from a minute and a half to 5 minutes. The average height of an eruption is 145 feet, or 44 meters. A little later in Utah, a brief stop at Great Salt Lake, where people can float effortlessly in the high saline water. And then a visit to Yosemite Park and Mariposa Grove. Located in the southern portion of Yosemite, the Mariposa Grove of giant sequoias is the largest sequoia grove in Yosemite and is home to over 500 mature giant trees. The sequoia named Grizzly Giant is estimated to be 1,900 to 2,400 years old, the oldest tree in the grove. It has a volume of 34,000 cubic feet and is counted as the 25th largest tree in the world. It is 210 feet or 64 meters tall and has a heavily buttressed base with a basal circumference of 92 feet or 28 meters. The Wawano Tunnel tree was a famous giant sequoia that stood until February 1969. It had a height of 227 feet or 69 meters and was 26 feet or 7.9 meters in diameter at the base. A tunnel was cut through the tree in 1881, enlarging an existing fire scar. Created as a tourist attraction, this human-made tunnel became immensely popular. Visitors were often photographed driving through or standing in the tunnel. At what was likely the western end of the trip in California, a visit to Hollywood's RKO Studios and the Art Deco Montecito apartments, home to movie stars of the day, was a juxtaposition to all the nature experiences. Lake Mead, Hoover Dam, and a visit to Grand Canyon towards the end of the trip. I'm uncertain which cave this may be. There are clues. Perhaps someone will solve this little mystery, but home footage of interiors of caves at this time is rather rare. We end with a very brief visit to the 50,000-year-old Barringer Crater, an impact crater about 37 miles east of Flagstaff. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Be kind, and we'll see you next time on Real Life.